I'm Leah Bracken. I graduated, I'm a Feb. I graduated in 18.5, so February of 2019. I'm a customer engineer at Google. I used to work at Oracle. So a little bit of the agenda, doesn't have to be that formal, so feel free to stop me at any time, but I'll just go through an introduction of who I am, kind of when I graduated to where I am today, talk about the cloud a little bit, the day in the life of someone who's a customer engineer, and how do you get there, and any questions, but of course you can stop me at any time. So like I said, I graduated, that's me in the chapel in February of 2019. And now I work for Google. And so basically my last semester, I did a bunch of interviewing, trying to find a job, trying to find that next thing, as I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And I got a job at Oracle in the cloud space. I had no idea what cloud is. I'm sure you have no idea what cloud is. Most people don't. That's okay. When I started my first day, I was in a new grad program. So I started with other people who had just graduated college. And on our first day, none of us knew what cloud was. And so we spent the next 4 weeks kind of training up, understanding the technology and the position that we're in, called customer engineer or cloud engineer or solutions engineer. There's many different names for the same thing. Is basically you're the technical part of the sale. So you're technical, but you're also customer facing. So it's a big marriage between, learning technical concepts and understanding how to understand, products and how to build out different solutions, but being able to articulate that and, also kind of be willing to put yourself out there in front of customers and being able to answer some really tough questions, or at least maybe not answer, but at least be the face for tough questions. There's plenty of times your customers ask me and I say, that's a fantastic question, I will get back to you. When really I was like, I have no idea what they just said. And that's okay. And so I found at Middlebury, I very much had no idea what I was doing. I was kind of just like, oh snap, I need a job. And that really hasn't changed. I'm just more sure that I'll probably figure it out. So I worked for 3 years at Oracle, and I did get a last round interview for Google before I accepted my job offer. I didn't get it, obviously, but that's okay because Google reached out to me in February. Now they wanted me, and I interviewed, and I've started there and been working there for about 2 months. And so it's a little bit different. Google's a very different company than Oracle, and I'm happy to talk more about that and what my experience has been like. But that's kind of been my transition from when I've graduated to where I am now. And I can say it's totally okay if you have no idea what you're doing, no idea what you want to do. I still don't know what I'm doing, and that's totally fine. So kind of going forward, does anyone know what the cloud is? Cloud computing is basically on-demand computing resources. The way you interact with it is it's through the internet, and the main thing is that you don't own it. You just pay for what you use, and it's someone else's infrastructure. And so you pretty much had it. It's a bunch of data centers, and it can be databases. It can be different types of products, and it kind of ranges from just infrastructure. So, you want to be able to run a lot of your databases. You want to be able to manage a lot of your application and your stack. That's more of the infrastructure. Or it could be something like Gmail. Gmail is type of cloud where it's like an end product that you access over the internet, but all of that web development, all of that infrastructure that you use is hosted somewhere else. And so it's basically someone else is kind of doing part of the work for you, and you pay for what you want to use. In cloud, kind of going to my next thing, is that kind of where it comes to different cloud providers, there's 3 major players. I'm sure you've heard of AWS. That's Amazon Web Services. They have the biggest market share at about 34%. They're the big ballers coming in. They're the ones that have been there for a while. I believe Google did release some sort of cloud product called App Engine back in like 2008. But really the next big player that came out around 2010 was Microsoft Azure. That's the next kind of cloud provider that's really big. And then Google, from what I understand, that they really struggled with is that they're a great tech company. They really understand how to build up tech. They're not a great sales company. So they had a really tough time learning sales cycles. How do you kind of make your product more profitable? Because a big part of Google is where they get their revenue is from ads. I think about 80% of the revenue is from ads. And so they're really learning how do they actually have a formal sales cycle. And so the person who's actually the head of cloud technology at Google used to be from Oracle. Oracle is what I would say is a sales company, but it sells tech. So it's not a really big tech company, and they've done databases, they've done a bunch of different technology, and they have their sales cycle down. They didn't start coming into the cloud much later. They have about 2% of the total market share, but they're a much more refined machine when it comes to selling technology versus a company like Google. I think Google really relies a lot on its name brand, and it does have really great technology. It's just now in the last couple of years really figuring out how do you sell and how do you leverage and make the business value for a lot of the products that they've created. More questions on that or more clarification on the cloud? Cool. So those are kind of the major players when it comes to the cloud. So what do I do as a customer engineer or a cloud engineer? It can vary. And so that term is like very generic and it can really change. When I was at Oracle, I had kind of two different transitions of what I was for my role there. I was a classic, it was called solution engineer, where I was kind of mapped to key accounts, working with sales reps, building out demos and displaying those demos to the customers and trying to get them to sign on to the cloud or at least trying to increase their consumption in the cloud. And then I joined a team. Also, my title changed for some reason because I do that. I do rebranding and I became a cloud engineer. And I joined a team where it was much more event based. So we would pitch our event to customers. We would work with them and develop use cases. And we would essentially have what's like a hackathon with a customer for about a week. And we'd build out a prototype with them. So I knew a customer, a generic was, I don't know how the business insights of my data. I don't know like about the supply chain. Like I need to have better insights. Oh, that's great. We have this great analytical tool. Why don't we get your data into our database and we'll spin up an instance and show you how you can leverage that. And we build out a solution with the customer during about a week's time and build a prototype. And so that was a way to make more consumption in the customer's kind of instance of the cloud, and then also get them, that's customer white glove service. It was a free service as long as they were working in the cloud and working with customer relations. Now that I'm at Google, it's a little bit different, even from where I was before, is that we have a team that's basically made up of customer engineers and sales reps, and we're one team together, and we're usually kind of mapped with one or two sales reps, and we're working with them basically to go out there and sell Google Cloud, try to get them on there. A lot of Google is what they call greenfield. So they're trying to go in, and a lot of the customers either have no cloud footprint, or they're with Azure or AWS and kind of going out there and almost like cold calling and saying, hey, Google's great. You should come over here. And that's kind of what it is. Any more specific questions about like what that would look like or anything kind of around there? Yeah.
What would be like a typical day in the life doing that at Google?
Yeah. So right now where I'm at is another part of being a customer engineer is certifications. I thought when I graduated Middlebury, I would never have to take an exam again. I was wrong. Unfortunately, I had to take a lot of certifications at Oracle. Right now, I'm studying for a certification that's called PCA. It's like a professional something architect. So right now for my day in the life is I'm going on calls and getting ramped up with a customer. So there, I can talk about that in 1 second, but I'm also studying for the cert. And so from what I understand is you have to keep those up. And depending on what type of customer engineer you are, because you can have someone who's more in data or app development, or I'm just infrastructure modernization, you have different certifications that you have to study for and maintain. So probably about, depending where you are, 10 to 20% of your time, you're probably studying for something or learning something. But for me this week is I joined a customer call where the customer is very new to Google Cloud and they want to come on. And so they're learning about identity and access management, and they've signed off on what's called a proof of concept. And so a proof of concept is basically the customer says, in order for me to be convinced that I want to come on your cloud, I need to see this prototype, or like I need to see how this works in the cloud. And so we, Google, will provision like a new instance, a new tenancy for them, and build out an entire solution for them to try and prove to them what they want is possible. And so we're working right now with that, should be starting in November. The normal day of life is you work with, they're called FSRs, so field sales reps. You get a certain number of accounts. So say like 5 that are assigned to your team. You think of ways that the cloud could benefit them, like I know this, like one website has a really bad search. I know one of our products is a really great search engine. We should go into the customer and pitch to them that like they need Google so they can like increase their search engine. So it's a lot of brainstorming on how you can bring value to the customer, and then just reaching out to different contacts that you would have at that company, trying to set up times to do presentations or to pitch to them or set up a demo. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you said, like the stuff that you're like constantly studying and like taking exam for, is that like you're studying about like the product that you're selling, or like what type of stuff are you like learning?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So one is like making sure you know all the products that the company you're working for has, like what's in their suite, because you want to be able to talk to those different products when you're with the customer. Another thing is just general architecture. So I'm in the infrastructure modernization. Basically, what that means is a lot of companies that have their own data centers. So like they don't work in the cloud. They run, maintain, have their entire data structure. They have to work on cooling, all that jazz, but they want to move to the cloud. And so how you do that, it's pretty complicated. So there's different architectures that you have to know about, and what's the right way to manage, to basically move someone's data across. Like how many instances should you have spin up on a virtual machine? Are they looking to actually just transfer their application? Because sometimes they have an old legacy application that no one knows how it's written and they can't break it. And so they just want to move that to the cloud versus like, hey, I know we're losing a lot of money. I want to work in Kubernetes. Can you help modernize this for me? And so it's one, knowing the products, two, knowing the methodologies around how you architect a solution in the cloud. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and is it you that like does the coding for like transferring data and all that to the cloud, or what?
Yeah, there's certain teams within an organization. So I'm a sales engineer basically. So I would do all of the theoretical, like any questions they have about, hey, how would I actually go about transferring my application from on-prem into your cloud? Or what if I have AWS and I want to be able to hook up to one of your databases? I'm the person who'd be able to answer that. But if they were to sign off on it and say, okay, now I want you to actually do that, there's a whole other team that actually does the implementation. So it's kind of like I'm just the salesperson, basically the technical salesperson that can answer that, maybe bring in someone who's a little bit more technical to talk more about the nitty gritty. But when they sign off on that from the actual, there's another team that will do that, or what we have is partners. And so there's a lot of companies out there that specialize in working with Google, in working with AWS, and they'll make a deal. So we have one partner where it's like you get 20% of our product, 20% of our profits, but you're going to go in and help the customer and maintain their solution because they don't have the technical people to do it. And so it's not our team, but there are other, like if you're interested in that, there are avenues, there are teams that do that, if that makes sense. Okay, great. So how do I get to the cloud? As I mentioned before, when I graduated, even when I started my first day, I'm pretty sure 2 weeks into my first job, I didn't know what the cloud was. So the fact that you guys even know about it, that's great. You're one step ahead of me. I would say if you're interested in the cloud, I would think about what part of the cloud you're interested in. Obviously, there's a lot of different roles. You could be someone who's actually building the cloud products. So, someone who's on the product management team, who's actually thinking of these different solutions and building them out. You could be a sales rep or you could be a customer engineer. If you're interested in this type of role, the reason I really like it is because I really like talking to people. Sometimes I can't stop talking, and that's great if you like to be around people. And that's really what kind of sales is meeting people, going to different conferences, meeting with the customer, but you still get to remain technical, which I really like. It's the marriage between a technical role and a front customer facing role. And the best way to prepare for this is being able to articulate technical solutions or the value of different technical solutions to a person, because it really is, at the end of the day, you're in a sales role. So my interview for both Google and for Oracle was me giving a presentation. Google was a lot more in depth, but both of them had presentation components where you basically had to sell a solution. You had to say, hey, I can answer all of these technical questions and I can sell it to you. So it's a little bit different than I know your typical coding interview. where someone's just kind of watching you code but you still need to explain what you're doing. It's a lot more about, let me articulate why this is valuable to you and why you want it. Does that make sense? Cool. Well, that's pretty much my presentation. What I had going, I just got my Q&A here, but if there's any other kind of questions, I'm happy to answer anything, whether it be about my time post Middlebury, my time at Middlebury, Oracle or Google. Always happy to help out fellow mid kids.
What did you do when you were at Middlebury that led to you applying for Oracle and like getting a position working in the cloud?
Yeah, definitely. So at Middlebury, I really used the Middlebury network. Every single position interview that I ever got at Middlebury was because of a Middlebury person referred me. Every single time. Even for Oracle, I literally just reached out to someone and was like, hey, I'm totally interested in Oracle. I definitely wasn't. I didn't know what Oracle was. And they're like, oh, that's great. Like, my friend is the head of like this new grad program. You should check it out. I was like, sure. And then I had an interview and I still didn't know what I was doing. So I would say really make use of that Middlebury network. Mid kids love helping out other mid kids. I know friends who went to other schools like Duke and UVA. And when I tell them about like, oh yeah, I do anything, like I'd help out a mid kid, they don't have that network that we do. Middlebury kids really love Middlebury kids. So I pretty much was at the CCI like every day trying to get an interview, trying to get someone to review my resume, trying to reach out to somebody. I was like emailing 5 mid alums a week. So that was probably the biggest reason for why I got my job at Oracle, is because I was just asking Middlebury alums for referrals.
Yeah, I have a question. Going off of that, like, how do you think like a liberal arts education like contribute, or like does it help in any way with like your role now?
Oh, 1,000%. I think a big part of it is, I had my comp sci classes, but I also had, random theater classes that I took, and putting myself out there in uncomfortable situations, in front of people, and learning how to talk in front of people, or learning how to write an essay succinctly, because the big part of my job is like, yeah, you're technical, but you have to learn how to communicate, and that you'd be surprised how difficult that is. Also learning how to work with people you don't like is huge. Like I hated group projects, but they're going to be customers that are really rude, and you just have to put a smile on your face and kind of suck it up and deal with it. Middlebury really helped me with the communication aspect, I would say, and being uncomfortable. That was a huge part of it. Yeah.
Could you expand on how classes outside of computer science, like theater, helped you today?
Oh, yeah. I had this one class. It was called Communication Through Dance. I was so uncomfortable the whole time. I remember there's this one time, she's like, I want you to walk across the room and use your body to send a letter to your mother, or whoever is your mother in your life. And I just was like, this is so cringe. I am so uncomfortable. This is so weird. And so now when I'm like in meetings or I'm with people and I have to really put myself out there, I was like, you know what? I've been way more uncomfortable before, and having to put myself out there, this is really not, I've been a fool a lot, and that's okay.
What's something that you wish you knew other than like what the cloud is before like working in the industry?
I wish that I think a lot of this industry, I wish at Middlebury, I very much kind of faked it till I make it kind of thing. I never thought I was that smart at all. Like when I got in, I just thought I was kind of a hustler. And I wish I kind of knew not to stress too much about, like, even though it's technical, your personality and being willing to be kind and interested in people goes a really long way. Like being kind to people and making an effort to say hi to people and do things and be a team player goes a really long way. And so I wish, kind of like as I started at Oracle, I was really self-conscious that I didn't feel as smart as other people, or I didn't feel as technical, because I had no idea what I was doing. But I mean, not bragging or anything, but I just showed up every single day of my training, like early. I made a point to say hi to everybody. I really put the work in, even though I was definitely not the smartest one. I like bombed one of the like presentations. I got MVP of my class because I was just showing up. I was there, and that goes a really long way. And even though I have peers who were way smarter than me, I always got promoted in the cycle because I just always made an effort to be really kind and really nice, because at the end of the day, people care about people. And even if you're not the smartest person in the room, people like working with people who are kind to them. Any other kind of thoughts? And feel free, like, if you want to add me on LinkedIn, I always really appreciated all the mid kids that went out of their way to help me and like give me tours of offices. Like, I'm always down to pay that forward. So please feel free to reach out. If you guys want to learn more about Google too, or Oracle, I'm always happy to talk about them both.
Where are you based now?
So I'm out of Washington, D.C. They did ask me, the nice thing about Google is when you kind of like pass their interviews, they don't really give you an offer right away. They kind of are like, okay, they first asked me, they're like, are you open to relocation? And I was like, no. But basically your interview package, like your offer is good for a year. So they kind of waited until a team became available for me. And then it's also kind of like, oh, I don't have to leave my job right away. I can kind of sit on this for 6 months if I want to, and then decide to leave. So they told me they didn't have a job, and then 4 days later, they're like, wait, we do. So I found a team 4 days later, but they asked me if I wanted to relocate. I really like DC. I will say, when I was interviewing, I did a summer in New York, and I was like, I'm going to live in New York with all the other mid kids. And, you know, everybody goes to New York or Boston after Middlebury. And I ended up here in DC, and I'm really glad I did. If you haven't been to DC, I think it's a really underrated city. It's very beautiful, and it's very cool, and it's very clean. So yeah.
Is there like a somewhat of a mid like community there now?
Yeah,
Or no?
I think there's technically like an office. I will say most of the mid people here are obviously in government or some sort of nonprofit. When I first graduated, actually, right before I started my job at Oracle, there was a mid event, and I got to see Jeff in person again, because they do have an office in DC, and they will host some like alumni events. And then obviously the pandemic happened, but I loved going to them. Like, I don't know about y'all, but networking was always so fun, meeting other mid kids and seeing what they're doing, especially because it's a small enough community. So there is a like, I think it's downtown, like an office that's for Middlebury students. But if you're ever in DC, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to show people around or give a tour of the office too. Yeah.
Do you have any advice thinking about networking for keeping relationships like real and keeping them from getting stale?
Yeah, definitely. I totally know. It feels very strange. Sometimes it can feel like a transaction, right? Like you're meeting someone because like, I want a referral from you. That's why I'm talking to you. At least that's how sometimes people view it. And I think the biggest thing about that is just, like I said before, is just leading with kindness. If you genuinely like talking to people and genuinely like meeting people, then it's never like a transaction, if that makes sense. If you make an effort to really be kind and learn about people and keep in touch, then it's definitely, I know a lot of people struggle with it because it feels kind of weird or feels kind of icky. But at the end of the day, you can think of networking as like when you go to a party and meet somebody, like you're technically networking when you're going out and meeting friends and meeting new people. As long as you're genuine and kind to people and, you know, are willing as well, like if someone does something nice for you, to also kind of pay that forward or not return the favor, but also be a good friend, then I think it's, you know, maybe makes it less weird. But I remember, like, I would say a big skill to have is learning to talk to someone on the phone when you don't know that person, like calling a mid alum. I remember calling them when I was in my sophomore year. I lived in Star again, and being so uncomfortable. I was talking to like this like VP at this company, and I'm just like a sophomore mid kid who has no idea what they're doing. And I was like, so tell me about fintech. And like, I had no idea what I was doing. But as long as you take a genuine interest in them and really don't, it sounds bad, but like waste their time, then I think that really helps without making it kind of weird or stale.
Today we had resume one-on-one meeting with mid alumni, and when I asked one person about advice on sort of the getting into the big companies, he looked at my resume and said, "You need something about cloud in there." So between now and then, proud how you can write cloud on your resume.
Oh, that's so interesting. I guess I never thought about that because I'm in cloud. It is definitely up and coming, I would say. I guess because of my life is just cloud, that it always has cloud on there. But no, I think it's definitely way bigger than what it was. And I think it's definitely a lot of companies are investing in and a lot of places because it's part of modernization. It's part of making any company who wants to stay competitive has to become digital. And it's a great way for your company to become digital. Definitely. That's really good to know. I'd say the second thing is if you want a big company to look at your resume is get a referral. That's like the biggest thing. Have someone like refer you is a huge, huge, huge thing. I guess what really worked for me, and I think they still have this out there, and what my recommendation would be, I don't know if Google has something like this, but for Oracle, what I started was specifically a new grad program. So they kind of assumed that we knew nothing. So when we went in, we had 4 weeks. It was our 9 to 5 every day. We were learning about cloud products and we were learning how to sell them. So they kind of assumed we knew nothing, which was great because it really brought us up to speed. We learned how to kind of talk about it. They kind of told us about the different cloud offerings and solutions and how you should talk to the customer about it. When I joined Google, I think Google has, at least from what I understand in their cloud kind of sphere, is I'm considered very junior. Like I'm I'm the youngest person on my team. They're hiring people who have at least 2 to 3 levels of experience. So most people I work with like have kids and stuff and have like owned their own companies and everything, which is great for me because I get to learn a lot. Very intimidating. Again, I feel like I know nothing. But I also had an onboarding, but it was very different because they knew that you had sold cloud before. They knew that you had some sort of experience. It was more of just like, this is our product relative to what you've worked with. So I would look for those new grad programs. If you've never experienced cloud, if you are looking to work there, I loved my new grad program. I thought it was so fun. I had an awesome time. I'm still really good friends with all the people that I had in that program. I would 100% go for something like that. And if Google does have something like that, let me know. I'd be happy to refer you. I'm always on LinkedIn. If you ever want to reach out and have any questions about Oracle or Google or just, Middlebury life, post midlife in general, always happy to help out fellow mid kids and all that jazz. They always helped me out, so I'm always happy to pay it forward on the condition that you guys pay it forward. That's always my thing.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. See you.
Bye.
Bye.